Hey guys, welcome to the Silver Report Uncut. So the markets, they really tanked hard, and there was a really shocking reason for it, or an excuse that they're saying is the cause of all of this. Because yes, the administration was coming out and explaining that the drop in today's markets was all as a result of this fake CPI print. Now this had come out hours and hours before any selling began, and technically the selling began in cryptocurrency. And then from there it started to move over to the NASDAQ and everything turned to crap. It's been one of the worst selling days in history, really, because it's the worst since a couple of weeks ago, and that was the worst in history. So I'm going to read some of this fake news release, or they're saying it's fake, I don't know. It says the consumer price index for all urban consumers increased 1.7% in June on a seasonally adjusted basis after rising 1% in May. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported today that over the last 12 months, the all items index increased 10.2% before seasonal adjustment. The increase was broad-based, with the indexes for shelter, gasoline and energy and food being the largest contributors. After increasing in May, the energy index rose 6.4% over the month, with the gasoline index rising 5.8%, and the other major component indexes are also increasing. The food index rose 1.9% in June, as the food at home shelter increased 2.1%. So it's interesting because it doesn't seem too far off from what we're actually experiencing when we're having the real CPI come out. I don't know why they're trying to pretend like this is like impossible. It's never going to happen. Because these numbers don't even seem that intimidating. See, the scary part is that there's so much attempts to try to hide this and cover this up. That's the most concerning, because how can we live in a world where we don't know what the official data that's being released, we can trust it or not? And that's the ones that we can trust the least, it seems. Everything that is the largest and most premier institution in the United States is the fakest. That's how I feel these days, and it's really bad to have a point where we cannot trust these people that are in charge. Overwhelmingly, Americans totally have rejected government. They don't trust it at all. It's like 80% is in a recent polling I just saw. So 80% of the country, they hate what's going on. They don't trust them at all. They think they're liars. And it's a terrible thing, because that really leads to problems in a nation. We can't have this whole situation where obvious liars are taking over and everybody knows it. That's what it really feels like, right? If 80% don't trust them, it's obviously because they're liars. And they're trying to manipulate the data now, trying to manipulate the economic data. They were saying the other day they needed to redo the way the CPI is done. And you're damn straight, because it's coming in real bad. Now, this is crazy, because the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has said on Tuesday that the release that was circulating online, this was actually a forgery. They said, quote, "We're aware of a fake version of the June 2022 Consumer Price Index news release that is being circulated online." That was Cody Parkinson from the BLS in an emailed statement. And it was not a pretty day. Global sentiment is down. The German investor confidence crashed to the weakest level since 2011, and that was during a debt crisis in the zone. And then the US NFIB, the Small Business Outlook, it just hit a record low. A record low. Small businesses are not very happy. They're not impressed with some of the liars that are out there running things. It's dangerous when liars run things, because you never know. You can't trust anything they say. And heading into tomorrow's actual CPI print, the global stagflation appears to be accelerating. Inflation is coming in consistently hotter than expected. The economic growth is deteriorating rapidly. The rate hike expectations there also have been falling for the last 2 days, and the rate cut expectations, they're rising. As for quarter 1 2023, they're now back above 13 BPS. Bonds, they were bought up today, and there was an ugly auction, but the shift sent the yield curve tumbling to the most inverted since 2007. That was the 2s and 10s yield curve. It's not even headlines anymore. There was a time when we would say that the yield curve inverted, and this would get a lot of attention. This was big news. But we all know, it's like every once in a while you need a refresher in how things work. And ever since the yield curve continuously inverts every year or so now, it shows that we're really at the end of a system, and it's terrible that we're just now learning. We're just now beginning to learn. They were really focused on making sure we did not learn these things about the economy. We don't learn these things about bonds. We don't learn these things because they don't want us to understand. They don't want us, because these whole salvation rescue missions that they come in with, these QEs, the central bank is intervening in the economy, they're disproportionately enriching these men. They talk about the wealth inequality they're printing money and giving it to the largest corporations in the world, not just American corporations. They're printing money and giving it to them, telling us all that they're saving us from economic disaster. Where's the disaster? The disaster is being caused by the money printing. The disaster is them. So we're not avoiding disaster, we are in a disaster. And the 3-month and the 10-year yield spread is also collapsing. So stocks, they were weaker. They rallied into the U.S. cash open, but then they began to dump. And that was right into the European close. That's when it began to stabilize. But there was a massive sell program that hit. All majors, they were dumping hard. And there's really no obvious catalyst for that besides the fake CPI press release that had been floating around for hours that some claimed that was triggering it. And I don't believe that the market actually will move off of a fake CPI print because the algorithms, the computer-generated algorithms, they move everything in the markets. And they would have been able to determine that that was not a true story. Maybe momentarily, but it would have happened almost immediately. It wouldn't have taken, hours and hours after this had been released. But, like I said, it started in the cryptos, and then it turned over to the NASDAQ, and it ended up being the biggest sell program in 2 weeks, which is among the biggest sell programs in history. In the zone, the euro touched parity with the dollar overnight. That was perfectly hitting 1 right before bouncing. That is a huge, huge drop. There were interesting actions going on because traders began to test down toward that parity, and every time the euro dived, gold was bid implicitly. So once Europe was closed, the euro and the gold, they slipped even lower. That was as a result, and the Bitcoin, it tumbled back below 20,000. It came down to 19.5. WTI, it also tumbled 8%, breaking back below 100 for, compared to last week's lows. And this was as a result of a bigger amount of crude that they had on hand. And it continues to test toward its key 200-day moving average. And the CPI, which will be coming out tomorrow, there's for the last 5 months, the S&P 500 has fallen by an average of 0.78% on those days. Not a good days for markets when the CPI comes out, because that's when everybody gets a cool smack in the face with reality. Some of us know this. Why am I supposed to be nice? To tone it down. Some of us know this. It's not like they don't know this. These financial wizards and all these people running our economy, printing the dollars, they know this. They understand how all of this works. That's why they intentionally try to prevent us from knowing. I mean, it's clear. The Federal Reserve wanted a recession. It's getting a recession. It's getting a depression. And that's why I love that a lot of my subscribers out there, they say, why do you even call it a recession? And you're right. This is the worst thing I've ever seen happen to our economy, and they've done so much significant damage. And you think about it, right? Because most of this damage was done after all of this came through. I mean, there was all the fraud with the PPP loans. They just determined it was like 75% got sent to unintended people. So, I mean, why would we ever give banks any kind of decision-making power when it comes to the people's money, to the people's debt? Because it's not our money. We are in debt. Because the government doesn't have any money. They're not going to have any money. We're $30 trillion in debt and planning to go into a conflict with some of the biggest nations in the world. Can we afford it? Can we afford it? If they print all the money when the sun is shining, what are we going to do when it's raining? Because they're talking about replacing the dollar in global trade with the BRICS currencies. That's the latest newsprint that came out. And if they replace it with the BRICS currencies, I mean, that's going to have to be a conflict. There's going to be a real big struggle for power there at the top of this hill. Because it can't be done. It can't be allowed to happen. Because it's not just replacing the dollar; it's replacing it with those, the other side of the world. It's a very tense situation, and if this thing goes through like this, I mean, of course they're going to go into a conflict. Of course, it's going to be a conflict, and they've already been preparing for that for quite some time. I don't know how much of this they're causing, or how much of this is they're working together with. Because didn't they say this though? This was a part of the whole reset. That's what we're doing here. Was that the U.S. will no longer be a leader in the world, that a number of nations will rule, is what they were saying. So they plan to take us apart, and it looks like they're doing an excellent job. These people are masters. So instead of not knowing what they're doing, they are masters. It's just they hate us. Their intention is not to preserve the economy or maintain maximum employment. Their design is our poverty, that we will own nothing, and we will be happy. We'll just give up, I guess, hoping. Hope is already down. It's destroyed. There's no hope left. Small business index had also crashed to the record lows. People are out there thinking, my God, how am I ever going to survive like this? especially small businesses, because they can't afford these big, massive changes in inventory prices and delay times and everything. They're just getting pushed out because it's so much more money. You got the people sometimes with the rent wanting more money. Everybody's kind of tightened up. And this isn't even the beginning of the end here. It's about to get much worse because we are entering this global depression or recession, whatever you want to call it. Either way, people are going to lose their jobs. When you talk about New York City and they keep pretending like their economy is healing, there's only still like 17-18% of the offices are back in. These people have abandoned those buildings. There's all those buildings that flood every major city in America, and they're switching over to where we're no longer going to be working as much in person. We're going to be working online. That never changed for those cities. Their real estate market is wrecked. They keep talking about all these promising things. 75% of that office space is vacant, and nobody wants it. 75%. It's all office space, the entire city. My God, if you should see it. You should see it. It's well, not now, of course, because you don't want to die. It's very dangerous there. But it's a madhouse of buildings. It goes on and on. It seems like forever. And it's in such a small place. Like the land mass is not very big for as many buildings are there. Just to imagine 75% or more. It's more than 75%. It's much more. But that means they've been devastated. They're just waiting for like a strong wind to come over and push this entire hollowed out cracked den of a building. I mean, it couldn't even take a hit from any planes. Wouldn't even take one. Be gone in half a second. I thank you guys for stopping by and joining us. As always, stay free.